Okay, we're sending data to you. Okay, we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Sorry, there's videos that we gotta delete there that are like 1 second long. Welcome to the Homemade Camera Podcast. Not sure what episode number this is. We have a very special episode with a guest, David Hancock, who's going to tell us all about himself, cameras, camera building, what else he builds, and what he's working on right now, which is exciting. Welcome, Dave. Hey, David, welcome to the show. For those that don't know you from your mega famous YouTube channel, uh, who are you? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Hang on, hang on.
The first time today, and I had a little bit of nervousness that it was going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Test, audio test. My video stream is lagging up in the upper left corner by about quarter second, give or take.
Yeah, it is going to.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just one of, yeah.
Do you still need some audio test?
No, I've got you. Okay, I'm gonna just redo that Graham cut here for those people that are watching live. Apologies, I'm gonna do this again.
That's probably my mom.
No, it's not. Okay, welcome to the Homemade Camera Podcast. Not sure what episode this is. This is my second take around introducing our guest for this evening, David Hancock. A lot of you guys might know him from YouTube, but we're going to get real deep into the Davidosphere today and find out about how he got into cameras and making things, and a very influential YouTube channel and a new Kickstarter that he is running. So, David, welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself. Where are you from? How'd you get into photography?
Oh, thank you, Ethan, and good to see you too, Graham. So, my name is David Hancock from the David Hancock YouTube channel. I'm the primary person behind the channel, and I do, of course, get a lot of help from my wife on that. I've been a photographer for, well, if you go back to when I got my first camera, then it's been 33 years. And that first camera was one of those little purple and black Le Click disc cameras. Oh, yes. Yes. Swanky camera.
Nowhere to go but up.
Yeah. And then I progressed after that to a Minolta Weathermatic 110 before getting my K1000.
Was that one of those like yellow underwater looking type of Minoltas? I think I have a Minolta Dual AF or something like that. It's broken.
Yeah,
but
I've got one I've got one within a couple feet of me.
So how old were you at the time?
It was my 10th birthday gift. Was that Le Click, and it was a gift from my aunt and uncle, my dad's sister, and my dad did not want me to get a camera because he knew film was expensive, and I was enjoying using his DTL 1000 with no film in it. I didn't know at the time, and so my aunt and uncle knew I wanted a camera, and they decided we're just going to do this anyway, and that got me started.
That's like giving the little kids at Christmas the toys that make noise.
That's exactly right.
As long as you are not going to be present in the room, you can get the noise toys.
And that's the kind of uncle I'm going to be. So, Yeah, all of the toys my brother does not want his kids to get.
There we go.
Legos, musical instruments. Yeah. um, but yeah, it took off from there, and I did some photography courses in college. Ended up.
Wait, let me backtrack for a second. Where are you from? Where'd you go to college?
Yeah. So I grew up in Chicago. I've lived all over the country. I've lived on three of the four coasts. I've not lived on the Gulf Coast, but I've lived all over. So most of my childhood was in Chicago. Also lived in Philly, North Carolina, outside of St. Louis. I did grad school in DC. Lived in California for 10 years. Now I'm in Denver. This is where I plan to stay. I will be carried out of here in an urn, hopefully. And so I like it here. So I grew up in Chicago and just started doing photography there. Took a few courses. So I was taking college photography courses while I was in high school. And then kind of put it away during college to focus on my English degrees, and picked it back up after college. And just would shoot whatever I could take photos of. Really picked it back up significantly when I got into digital photography with my Pentax K7 when that camera was released. So,
what year was that? Approximate
2010.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the year that I started taking 15 to 20,000 photos per year on each of my cameras. And now it's usually around 30,000 photos per year.
And before that, maybe it was just like vacations type of taking photos.
Yeah, it was a couple dozen rolls of film a year, maybe 3 dozen vacation photos, or I would just say I had my dogs. I wanted to take photos of Hannah and Cheever, and so I'd go buy a few rolls of film for that.
Mm-hmm. So after that, that's 30,000 pictures. That's like you're walking around with a camera every day over your shoulder.
Yeah. When I but leading up to and then after I started my YouTube channel, I would literally take a camera with me everywhere. It's easy now with a cell phone. Back then, I didn't have a cell phone that had a camera built into it. So it would be my K7 or one of the film cameras that I had was always with me. Mm-hmm. It was, and that I think is the best thing somebody who wants to get better at photography can do, is always have a camera on them all the time.
Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's the best advice I think anyone's ever going to get from anyone.
I will not disagree. And so are you living in Denver at this point?
Yeah, we live outside in a little suburb of Denver. It's very quiet life. We live in a fairly nice apartment. I have wonderful views. I'm in one of the buildings. There aren't that many. One of my buddies said he thinks there are either 9 or 11 buildings in the whole of the metro area that can see the entire Front Range from Devil's Head to Long's Peak. And so I step out on my patio in the morning or in the evening, and not right now because of all the wildfire smoke, but when the air is clear, we can see the entire Front Range from our patio. We were exceedingly lucky that I happened to call up the apartment complex literally at the right time, within a day of this unit becoming available, and about half an hour before the next person called and said they were interested in it.
The photographer's suite. So, David, yes. Do you photograph that Front Range like 20,000 times a year?
No. I photographed Evans, which is due west of our patio, and we have a lovely view of that mountain, which has a wonderful profile. But I don't actually photograph our view to share because I don't necessarily want anyone to triangulate where I live. But I do. I get out when I photograph mountains. I don't like photographing them from far away. I want them to absolutely dominate the frame and be a major part of that image element. And that just means getting in the car, going out to a trailhead, and getting closer to the mountains. Mm-hmm.
Understood. So you're more like of a classical landscape guy.
Yeah, very much so. And when I started off photographing, my mom got me all the Ansel Adams books, and I read them over and over, and just tons of photo books. And it was all really steeped in landscape work, and I was enjoying that right off the bat. And now here I am living in a place where it is impossible to take a truly bad landscape photo without trying. It's helped.
I grew up in the Bronx reading Ansel Adams books when I was like 14, thinking I would be a nature photographer. It was like, I mean, what? It's not happening back home. But yeah, I also find myself living, I don't know if you consider the Sandias the Front Range anymore or a different mountain set, but somewhere near the Rockies where things look bananas, and I just can't, get used to it.
You know what? Honestly, the Front Range, it's not even the prettiest mountains in Colorado, not by a long shot.
I'm a big fan of Maroon Bells.
Yeah.
They're not there.
The San Juans, for me, they just have these super dramatic, jagged peaks, and I just wish they weren't such a long drive.
So are you a backpacker, David?
Yeah, I'll do day hikes. I have zero interest in sleeping out days at a time because I have an irrational fear of bears. But
so, I'm mostly afraid of the cougars.
I don't think you can really say that there is ever an irrational.
Yeah, no, but like bears are so chill, particularly black bears in Colorado. Like,
black bears are fine.
We were driving.
Polars,
I don't think you're gonna find too many.
We don't get those down here.
Yeah, no, polars you don't. You get. Wouldn't there be grizzlies relatively?
I don't think Colorado has any grizzlies right now. I think someone saw a brown bear, but I could be wrong about that.
I mean, if there are grizzlies, it's like one that has wandered in. But the last grizzly bear was shot in the Sandias like in 1909 or 1919 or something like that.
I've dealt with black bears. Black bears, you're right, are chill.
Yeah, we were driving through Durango a couple of years ago, and like this giant black bear just crosses the street and like goes to the dumpster behind a pizza place. And it was like, there are also people crossing the street in the same like crosswalk, and it's just like, member of the community, just happened to be 800 pounds.
That's right.
Claws, but the cougars are always a little scary to me because they actually will stalk you. But
the moose, they're the ones I'm the most afraid of.
Interesting.
I mean, if you want, my closest encounter with wildlife since we moved out here was in Rocky Mountain National Park, and I was hiking up this trail, and I get about 15 feet from this bush, and all of a sudden the bush stands up. At least that's what I thought, but it turned out it was just a gigantic bull elk that had been lying down behind the bush, and I couldn't see its antlers. They just looked like branches. And so here is this gigantic, very angry bull elk standing above me, 15, maybe at most 20 feet away, which is well within the danger zone. And the worst part was there were all of these people up on this, 50, 100 feet away from me with their cameras. And I thought, oh, there must be an elk way out in that meadow there. No, they just chose not to warn me that it was right in front of me.
Well, that's how they get the good pictures.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're about to be a meme, buddy.
Let's get a picture of this guy with an antler in his belly. And so I had the Nikon, was it the F4 or the OM1, one of those two with me, and a telephoto lens. So I just started photographing away. And as I had a 500 millimeter on it, so it must have
I'm in the danger zones.
Exactly.
So what do I do?
Away. I am too close to focus with this lens. Let's back up. So I did that, and it started following me, and was clearly not a fan of the sound of the camera. So I just finished the roll quickly, and just put a tree between me and the elk, and just moved trees between it as I backed away. And eventually, after about 10, 15 minutes, it decided it was not going to gore me and walked off into a meadow to go eat some grass. So, but I legitimately thought I was going to die. So I thought, well, I might as well make these last photos that I take really exciting.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we got his film.
That's right. How do we develop this stuff?
Jeez.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So, okay. So we have some idea about the photography you like to do, at least these days. You're also a maker of things.
Yes.
How'd you get into when you were a kid? Did you make models? Are you an engineer of sorts? I mean, what sort of inspired your making of machines?
I made models a bit as a kid. More it was Legos, and I don't know if you remember the old toy Constructs. Constructs were one of my brothers and my favorite toys were Constructs and GI Joes. And so we would take the Constructs and we would make these gigantic robots that were the same height as us out of the Constructs, and then the GI Joes would ride those. And so that was like the foundation for my learning about how to make basic boxes that interacted with each other. And so that is also where my learning about building boxes ended. And but I did get into making different pieces of camera kit early on. Whether when I digitize film, I use my DSLR. And so I built a digitizing stand about 12 years ago that I still use today, just out of a spare and larger part, some scrap wood, and some plumbing components. And it works really beautifully when the downstairs neighbors aren't running their AC on full and shaking the floor. And so I just mount the camera and digitize the negatives. And I made some other things. I've made a lot of different lenses and things like that adapted them for Sony E. And but I got into building cameras because I wanted to learn large format. And there's a huge learning curve going into large format with a monorail or a field camera, and I was struggling immensely. One of my friends who's a photography professor, I was explaining to her my troubles, and she just said, it's film. It works like any other film. It's but where I was getting into trouble was understanding how lens movements affected exposure and things like that. So at any rate, I got into pinhole work because I wanted to understand, was it something with the cameras or was it something with my understanding? And so I built all of these experimental pinhole cameras, things like like a stereoscopic one that used 8x10 picture, photo paper, and different things like that. They were all fun. And but when I built the ones that I have on Kickstarter right now, it was because one of my friends and subscribers couldn't use his cameras anymore, and he hated that he couldn't get out and take pictures. I had it in my head to build these, and I thought, well, what if I made these so that literally anyone could use them? What would a camera like that look like? And I just sat down and just started revising these things to be easier and easier to use for everybody. One of the big things is I wanted these also to be usable by people who have really poor eyesight, which happens to most people as they start to get older. So if I knew that I could make something that would be usable for people who can't see well and who don't have really good finger dexterity, then people who can see well and can use their hands just fine would have no issue using it.
It's like the classic product design exercise where you're left-handed with a handful of oil trying to operate a toothbrush or push buttons on a camera.
Exactly it, yeah.
This camera works great, but it's real oily.
Yeah. What are all these weird handprints?
Hey, David, I promise I'm going to let you get into the real Kickstarter pitch, but the original question, sir, was about building, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about YouTube before we get to the meat and potatoes of this, but.
So I'm leaning on you to keep me on track.
Okay.
It is really easy for me to get off track.
Segue. No, so you started talking about building things out of Connects and GI Joes, and like somehow that leapt over 30 years of building things into Kickstarter. But in the meantime, like I think you probably build all sorts of complicated audio and video setups. It looks like your desk is covered in cameras. I've heard tell of you building, your own lenses and other cameras, and this is the first time I've heard about like a strap distribution company.
I also built my own computer. I don't know if you have a good view of it, but I probably not a good view, but I spec'd out and built my own computer from individual components.
Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have built a lot of different things. When I back in Illinois, I had half a garage to work with, and then later my own house. And in the house, I did a whole bunch of rehab projects. I shored up a foundation. So I bought this ancient house. It was built in 1938 and had been someone's vacation home, and it was just built on these piers in weak soil. And when I bought it, it was kind of doing this. So I noticed one day that
for those of you listening at home, David is gesturing that his house was sagging a lot.
Sagging in the middle, yes. Yeah. And what it so I set Hannah and Cheever were my dogs, and I was tossing him a tennis ball, and I noticed Cheever dropped the tennis ball and it rolled to the center of the floor. Should not have done that. And what had happened was the house was on 2 foot joists, 2 foot on center. And at the front of the house, just the way that they had been cut, there were knots, 3 in a row lined up in the first joist, and 2 of those joists had split at the knot. The one right at the door jamb, and then the first one in. So my buddy and I, we got under the house, we jacked it up with my car jacks until it was level, and then we laminated pressure-treated wood around these old two-dimensional joists. And like that was the most complicated project I'd ever done, building something. And but it was fun. Like doing things like that is a ton of fun. Since we don't own a house now, building anything I can get my hands on, whether it's a camera or my own lens boards or whatever, kind of stimulates that part of my brain.
So, okay. What year was this that you were working on the house?
06 to 09 is when I lived there.
So that's a little bit pre-YouTube.
A little bit, yeah. I started the YouTube channel in 09, and then I really kicked it off with camera videos at the beginning of 2011. So it's been a decade for YouTube now.
Well, and how'd that start?
So it started off, I had lost my job in 09, and I had moved out to California for a new job, which led to me losing the house because I couldn't afford a rent and mortgage at the same time with the new job. And I was in a pretty low period in my life, and I was talking to my brother about it, and I said, what if I lose this job? What's going to happen? And he said, well, you need some side income. Try YouTube. And I said, okay, why not? He said, I don't know what to talk about. He said, you like photography, you're good at it, do a photography channel. And so I started off doing some really simple tutorials, literally knowing nothing whatsoever about how to make a video. And I would just take...
And you started this like as a business.
I just started it as, let's have fun with this thing. And if I make a few bucks, that's fine. And I think my first month I made $5.38 in royalties, which was, yes, enough to keep me going. But not bad considering that my video setup was I would take a pillowcase and put it over the front of my desk and keyboard. And then I'd handhold my K7 and make this little 720p video of me doing something. Mm-hmm. And then upgrade it to using a tripod with that same setup.
Big deal.
It was very fancy. Uh-huh. Yeah, humble beginnings. So, and then, I haven't changed that much. This is my current YouTube studio right here. And so I've got the studio lights mounted around it, and then different parts that I use. I also repair all the cameras that I repair here as well. So you can see I've got my repair kit.
It's a very familiar looking set of parts.
Yes.
And that's
appropriately organized.
Yeah.
So,
gotta have that Ronson oil.
Yes. Yeah, I have I don't use that to fix anything. I use it to light pieces of metal on fire so that I can expand them and unscrew things that are stuck together. Not an idea I recommend for anyone.
I use it to dissolve grease that's like caked in the gears. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it should be used for. But over the years, I built up the subscriber base, and I would get feedback, like really legitimately good feedback from my subscribers. Hey, your angle sucks. Your lighting sucks. Or here's how...
So wait, hold on. So what you are, what you are telling me is that you had trolls come to your channel, and your take on it is, I had some really good feedback
They were honest with what
You-
I was doing wrong. But more importantly than those guys was that people would ask me questions. I would do a video and they would say, hey, what's this other thing that I'd not thought of talking about? So looking at, okay, here's how my lighting sucks. Here's how my setup sucks. I would improve those. And then here are the questions people have. Let's put that into my outline. And so I would revise my outline and my content presentation based on the criticisms and the trolls that I was getting. And that sort of thing has really helped make the channel what it is, because the questions people ask were questions that everybody asks, and now I know how to address them in the videos. I remember I think the most important question I was asked in any video comment was about two and a half years ago. And someone said they were watching one of my 90s SLR videos, and those have a third video that's all about how the archaic menu system in those work. And they said, this is great. You're telling me what the things in this menu are, but I don't understand at the end of the video how they affect my photography. Mm-hmm. And so I completely redid all of my camera manual outlines based on that comment, so that at every single point for something that's not completely logical, I would remind myself to explain how that
it doesn't presume that the user knows
exactly.
photography either.
Yep.
Which is an interesting thing about like the old Nikon F manuals. They're like basically a photography manual with camera manual. Now, like they won't explain necessarily in a camera manual what aperture does, right? They'll just say the aperture button is here.
Correct.
Correct. Interesting.
And I found that there was a serious need for people to understand at a very remedial level how photography works. Mm-hmm. And not just film photography, but photography in general, because it is so easy now just to pick up a cell phone and not know what you're doing and still get a really good picture, that when someone progresses into film, there's no forgiveness whatsoever, even with,
I'll forgive them.
Yeah, I will too, but the camera will not. But so I started trying to make things that were super remedial, so that people who were just learning, instead of having this long flat learning curve, could just shoot straight up and get to a point where they were taking better photos right away.
So it was this idea of like you sort of distilled your brand or method on YouTube to a not only like it's like a photography course and a camera manual in one.
Yeah, I kind of want to be YouTube's photography professor.
This thing on your channel makes me chuckle every time. Hi, I'm David Hancock. Well, YouTube's photography professor. But my immediate question is: aren't you then making a million photo courses that are the same course mixed with this is your photo course with this camera? Okay, now we're going to go through the same photo course, but we're going to hold this camera, or does that sort of frustrate you, or
it gets very tedious.
Uh-huh. But you seem like a man for details, though. Just looking at you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a professional background in technical writing, and so
are you a tech writer?
I'm a marketing writer, but I've always worked in exceedingly technical fields, and so I come out of the engineering and construction fields, and the marketing work that I do has to explain the technical ins and outs of work that the company is bidding on, and because of so I worked for a decade with bulk fuel storage, transmission, and distribution.
The buzzwords are gallons per minute flow, or
barrels.
Yeah, whatever.
It's exactly right. Yeah. So, but I had to teach myself in a writing sense. I had to be able to write about how to weld. When are we going to use this different type of welding stick or welding method? So when we weld up aluminum, how are we doing that versus welding up carbon steel, TIG versus MIG welding? And I've done that with all kinds of different trades. I find it fascinating. So it does absolutely get very tedious to make the exact same camera video over and over again. When I made a whole boatload of Canon camera manuals last year, it was like 20 of them in the span of 3 days. I came away from it and said, I really don't ever want to do that again. Because it was literally all the Canons have the exact same menu system, but someone's not going to be coming up to YouTube and saying, how do I use a Canon camera? They're going to say, how do I use the Canon XT or whatever? And so the advantage of that, even though every video feels to me exactly the same,
it's a business. You're putting out the Kelly Blue Book, you know, or the not Kelly Blue Book. I'm sorry, the Haynes Manual.
Haynes Manual, or exactly. But the real benefit to the subscribers is that they can come away from it saying, here is, I now understand my camera. So I want them to understand their specific camera.
Interesting. And you make other videos as well.
Yeah, and the camera manuals, I'm getting to a point, I was thinking about this the other day, where I've pretty much done what I can do with those. I have about 250 cameras sitting on the shelf over here that are going to be the last of the camera manuals that I do, in the sense that I do them now. You're
going to do another 250?
Give or take, yeah. I've already bought the cameras. Why not?
That's amazing.
So, but then I'm going to do more lens reviews. I'm going to really double down on the detailed film guides, the All About Film series. Those are the videos people stay subscribed for. That is by far my most popular series.
By the way, I can't wait for the Vivitar V4000 manual. You looked over. You have one of these, don't you?
I have a 2500. I hate to disappoint.
Oh man!
You got to make that same video twice, and then the top shutter speed.
Yeah.
And no, the V4000 is basically the Phoenix P1.
Yeah, okay. And 800 other cameras. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, David, do you have a lot of different collections of things?
I have over my life. Now it's cameras. I mean, I've sold all the G.I. Joes, all the Constructs, all my childhood toys. And now I just have the adult toys.
You heard it here, folks. David Hancock, adult toy collector.
That's right.
Oh crap.
Okay. I lost my.
Okay, so here I've got a question. So if you're working with all of these different cameras. You talked about going to a pinhole camera to try to figure out what was going wrong with the large format. Why pinhole? What was the advantage of going to pinhole? Why didn't you just stay with a lensed large format? I've got a great place in my heart for pinholes. And I can look, and I've got about 6 of them sitting on my desk right now. What was it about the pinhole that was an advantage to you? What was it about the pinhole that you found interesting? And had you been shooting pinhole cameras before that?
Yeah, so I had shot pinholes, and I'd made them out of everything from like old aluminum film cassettes, a Monster pop or energy drink can. I think one of my earliest videos was that. I went to pinholes because they have one variable, and it's a fixed focal length, a fixed field of view. The only thing that I can mess up is the shutter speed. And so if I calculate the shutter speed correctly, then I know everything else is correct, and I'm on the right track to figuring it out. If I come back and it's way over or under, then I have done something wrong. And so that taught me the basics of how does sheet film work. And it turns out my friend Alice was right. It is just film. But it stripped away the complexity of lens movements. And lens movements, so I'm working on an 8-part mini-series right now, and I'm about 20% done drafting it. The ins and outs of large format lens movements. It's going to focus on things like the wedge of sharp focus and how that relates to the hinge line, and the way that the mechanics behind how movements front and back, axial or base tilt, affect where focus is and things like that.
Or-
And so I was using these 4x5s, and I was not calculating properly the exposure with the reciprocity failure for nearer subjects. But I also wasn't calculating appropriately for light loss based on lens movements. And also, I think the lens movement issue is really the big thing. With large format, when you get to a point where you're about 30 degrees off center axis, you've lost a stop of light. And so that translates, and of course, starting out in 4x5, oh look, this camera can bend like it's like all, like a
accordion
all over the place. I'm going to make it do that, which is the big stupid mistake that everyone starts off.
No, you only make it do that to advertise it on eBay.
That's the way it should be done. Yes, it should only be for advertising. But I was doing that, and so that was one of my big mistakes. And I learned through the pinhole use that if I just kept things simple, then the results would be better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Were you doing any front adjustments? So one of the things that would be an issue there would be image circle.
Yeah.
And so generally with a pinhole, you're going to have a much wider image circle to work with than a lensed setup, and you're looking like you're thinking about whether that's true or not. I don't know.
It is. So yes and no, it is. With a pinhole, you have a larger total image circle than the majority of lenses.
Okay.
Now that's not true with things like, say, the Schneider XL series, right? Like the 72 millimeter, which covers 5x7. A 72 millimeter pinhole is not covering 5x7.
Okay.
But with pinhole lenses, you have a smaller usable image circle, which is to say a smaller, evenly illuminated image.
Okay, so you're talking about fall off.
Correct.
Correct. The edge. Okay.
Fall off, but also the point at which magnification results in too great a level of distortion for the image to really be recognizable. Because image distortion is just a function of magnification. Okay. And so I have the Ondu 3 4x5 pinhole camera, and it's it's like that thin, right? And then mine is about twice as thick. And the difference in illumination and with the Ondu, you get a center area that is well illuminated, and then the whole thing just dissolves into darkness.
Yeah.
Whereas with mine, it's evenly illuminated corner to corner. So it's a question of usable image circle versus total image circle.
Okay. When we get to that, I'd love to delve more into what your design decisions were on these. But so you're working with pinholes, pinhole cameras. Are you at this point early on? Are you drilling those pinholes yourself, or are you purchasing with the idea of, hey, I need something that is absolutely reliable in its circular and its consistent size and stuff like that when you're doing your experiments?
Yes, it's the latter, because I wanted all of the experimental cameras to function or to tell me how the finals would function. So I didn't want the fewer the variables. It's the scientific method. My dad was a scientist. The fewer the variables that change, the more predictable and reliable the outcome. So I found, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, I found the guy who makes the pinholes for Harman.
Oh, he's making
them for me.
I've bought his pinholes before. You can buy them on eBay, folks.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if he wanted me telling people that. So
no. I've shared that before. If you guys go back to when I was talking, I used his pinholes in the 24 squared. So that was it. And his pinholes are effing excellent.
Amazing.
Absolutely
if you want amazing.
Consistent pinholes, I forget what his name is, but I can.
And they're accurate to within a half a millimeter. So, for instance, if I have two of my models that use 0.55 millimeter pinholes, and they are consistent. Every single one has been exactly the same. So, Yeah, so I wanted them to be exceedingly precise. I think it is a general practice when building something, the fewer things that vary across the design, the better the finished result's going to be. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for experimentation and randomness, and that can yield some really promising results and some fun experiments. But there's a difference in design philosophy between experimentation and predictability. I heard a speech or a talk given by one of the senior engineers at Ilford some years ago, and he was talking about the difference between experimental film, expired film, or things that have been treated with chemicals to create different colors and looks, versus somebody who's attracted to using Ilford film, which is to say, if they started using HP5+ when it first came out and they're using it today, the results are going to be exactly the same, even though the chemical compounds and formulation within the emulsion is different today than it was back then because of environmental regulations and chemical availability today versus back then. And that's where he was talking about Ilford's R&D and the way that their budget goes into engineering their film stocks to continue performing the same way, even as chemicals are no longer able to be purchased in the UK. Mm-hmm. So, and that's, I think, an important and a very hard discipline. It's an important discipline and hard discipline to make things perform consistently as we work to build them better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. So let's.
Good time.
Ethan. Oh, what?
I'm thinking now is probably a good time for a break, unless we want to continue on more about YouTube and then come back and talk about David's Kickstarter project.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on.
Okay, so those of you watching live will be gone for just a minute. I need to get some more drink. And those of you who are listening on the podcast, this will have been edited out. So what are you doing on my raw files? Get away from my... Yeah.
Okay, and we are back. Sorry, this is roll 2.
Oh, okay.
So we're ostensibly gathered here today, dearly beloved, to hear about David's Kickstarter campaign. I first found out about it. David had sent me a message. I had seen David's videos over the years, but we didn't know each other, and it said, "Hey, I'm launching this Kickstarter soon. Maybe I can talk to the podcast audience about it." And I said, "Okay, but fair warning, I have the exact same product coming out soon." And David said, "Cool, I'm gonna come on anyway." And I said, "Cool." So
I will present the rules. You will come out of your corners fighting.
no. No. So about 8 months ago, I was just like, sometimes I sit around and make like a 1 day or 2 day project with my friend Joe. Our friend Becky collects Leonardo cameras. This is, it's a box. It's not highly technical. But we made this about 8 months ago, and I was like, okay, Joe, I'm going to put it up for sale tonight. And then 8 months passed, and I got into other things, and I never did it. And then I get this thing from David, and I was like, okay, I wanted to release it with these self-developing backs, but I just released them because I had to. And then David made a bamboo version of much similar. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So I mean, functionally, a pinhole's a pinhole.
Oh, wait.
Right?
Before that, you've been working on this for like 7 years.
3. I started
7 versions.
In 2018. It's 7 versions in 1 year. This right here is number 9. This is the only of the pre-finals that I have left, but I actually just ordered last night. Just ordered the finals that I'm going to use to make the instructional videos for these. But yeah, 10 versions it took to get these to where I was like, yes, this is something I'm comfortable enough with other people using.
Yeah.
The first version was.
By the way, I have to say, Ethan and I just had that same discussion, because one of the cameras that I'm working on right now, I'm in version 5.
Yeah, we usually go to about 7.
Yeah, 7. Yeah, I still have a back to redesign. So it
takes time.
Yeah.
And, I think about some of the other Kickstarters. Like the other day, or this morning, I saw on my news feed that they finally announced that the Reflex interchangeable mount SLR is on hold. And I think a lot of people underestimate the difficulty with bringing a physical object to market.
Yeah.
So I honestly, starting this project, I thought, I'll have this thing hammered out, and figured it would be 6 months. And I just could not get it to a point where it was performing consistently. So I had a lot of bugs to work out. The first version was super janky. It looked like this on the sides, but the front didn't have the teeth. It was literally just a piece of wood that was glued on, because I was having trouble visualizing how to make that work. And then instead of having the exposure calculator on the back like this, the holders just went on the back, and then I just rubber banded them on because I hadn't figured out how to make them stay on the camera yet.
And I want to say, for people who are listening at home, this is a camera that appears to be laser cut wood. Yes. So, and it has the, crenellations, I suppose.
Box joints. They're laser cut box joints. It's a really standard way of making anything, on a laser.
Yeah. Okay. And I knew early on I wanted to use laser cutting instead of 3D printing because it's way more accurate. So this is accurate to within 0.2 of a millimeter, every single one of them. And that just means that everything's going to perform consistently and reliably. And the only reason it's that much of an inaccuracy, the CAD design is accurate to as near as perfect as it can be. But there's a 0.2 of a millimeter kerf on the laser. So,
I mean, the kerf doesn't. You can
design it out.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the kerf. It's actually the wiggle of the laser. Yeah. The wiggle of the beam, the alignment of your mirrors, the bumps in your tracks. But I mean, yes, lasers make things fast, relatively cheap compared to 3D printing, and repeatable in large numbers without a large number of machines.
Yeah, they're amazing. In fact, if the campaign succeeds, the proceeds are going to go to buying me a laser cutter so that I can make 120 cameras. That's really, I think, where people are going to be most interested.
Yeah, I think your designs would go from 3 years to a couple of weeks if you had a laser cutter. Like, this took me 3 versions over the course of 3 half days because I could just press cut and see. All right. I think there's no amount of designing in CAD or on paper that can get you away from having to make the damn thing and look at it. You're probably looking at a couple of weeks, for parts to come in.
Yeah, it's 3 weeks usually from order to arrival. Then I've got to order them or put them together, figure out what design element I put in the wrong place, and reorder that part. That happened a number of times.
Oh yeah. Try that with circuit boards. But we should, if it's 3 weeks, David, we should talk about some laser cutting things after the show.
Yeah, it was. I'm using a company that's pretty busy. So, but at any rate, I got off track. But pinholes are pinholes. So if you have a 0.5 millimeter pinhole, it's going to perform the same, whether it's 10 millimeters from the film plane or 100 millimeters from the film plane, no matter what's holding it. The difference is actually going to be in the camera itself and how that camera is built. So for me, the biggest thing that I did with these, and it's going to be impossible to see in here, I know, was I lined these with felt. And for everyone at home, I've got the inside of the camera here with a flashlight pointing into it. Mm-hmm. And basically, I created the felt so it's not just the shape of the wood, but there's an overhang on 3 of the sides. And then when it's put together, those overhangs end up overlapping. So if you can see at the corner there, I'm trying to angle it so you can see it.
That's how you light seal the box joints.
Correct. The box is light sealed. So the worst offender I had a 2 millimeter gap along the entire front of the camera from wood warping. And it was still light proof. I took a bunch of there was an 8x10 and a bunch of the sample images, all the sample images in the campaign are from that camera. And so this felt material that I use, it's doubled on every seam and 4 layers thick on every corner, because the corners are the most likely places to get a pinhole. Mm-hmm. And that approach really made them completely light proof. I'd had some issues early on when I wasn't doing that.
I have I know exactly what it is, which is that you can't cut the box joints in a way such that they fit 100% perfect, because then they wouldn't fit, right? And light has a much smaller tolerance than wood fitting. The way I do it is I have, let's see if we can see. I do have a lot of
bring yourself up.
Yeah, I will. I'm just moving my lights here. Oops. No, hold on.
Thanks, Robbie.
Okay, sorry.
I
didn't mean to do the closing roll. Oh, now we've lost. Here we go. Angel and Devil. So on the inside of these guys, I always have, like, on the front there's a frame, on the rear there's a frame, and then on the sides, they're just these sticks you glue in the corner. And then actually, I found one makes it much sturdier, right? Like, I'm sure yours are also, like, you could kick them down a flight of stairs and they'd be fine. You were using really thick bamboo, I noticed.
Throw them at a bull elk and run.
Right. But those sticks eliminate the need for, there's just no light in there. So you don't need felt. It's sort of just cheaper and easier.
I'm gonna say what I've used in the past is just wood putty and big thick wood putty. The problem is not always so great. And then I've also used black silicone. And both of those are good, but black silicone will get everywhere.
Well, so I have like a design philosophy. Like we've actually talked about this on the podcast a couple of times. Is baffles over seals. Where if I absolutely have to, right, and maybe on this 20 by 24, I will have to use some foam. But having been a buyer and seller of cameras for a decade, and that meant often paying somebody or doing it myself to pick out gummy old seals from things or refelt or fabric, like I always try and make like on the Bronco pan, the back door, right? It could have foam seals, but instead it's just got a baffle, right? Because light can't make a U-trap bend, just like your toilet, right? And so that everything that I build, if it's laser cut or 3D printed pieces coming together, I always make all the joints into a baffle, right? And that's basically what this is with the sticks in the corners. But that becomes like really important on an 8x10 self-developing deck, because you can't put like adhesives that will peel off of acrylic or smooth plastics to get, there's just it won't work. And so, one, you have to make them fit perfectly in a box joint, but two, then they have to be watertight and light tight. And so I'm always really worried about, how does everything fit? How does that have a baffle on it? I'll show you guys later after the podcast what I was working on yesterday. But yeah, I mean, I think felt is it just kills all light. It's great.
It does, and so also when the light cone extends beyond the area of the film plane, which it does, instead of bouncing off of like black paint or black tape or whatever, because the felt is textured, it's just like having an infinite number of microscopic baffles inside the camera. It just absorbs everything. I found using these with the felt, when I switched over to that, I was using photo paper and Ilford Multigrade 4, which is a really good and inexpensive one. It becomes like a two-tone, like a litho paper, just black and white. There is no, that's it, just contrast. Was not pleasing with that, but with normal films, they ended up performing really well.
Interesting. So okay, so you're making these, and they're bamboo.
They are.
There's bamboo. Okay.
They're 7mm bamboo.
It's like bamboo ply or composite, right?
Yeah. So it's three plies thick bamboo plywood. And my understanding is that the bamboo is grown in the U.S. and then the plywood is also manufactured here in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah, the supplier for this is FSC certified.
Okay.
So it's also sustainably grown and everything. So that's a big part of the cost driver, is because it's a U.S. material. It's not cheap.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to push back on that for a minute. Pretty much almost all woods that you would buy in Home Depot or Lowe's are also made in the U.S. Right? Bamboo ply is extremely strong, light, and dimensionally stable, and it is an expensive material. But it's not because it's made in the U.S. All wood you get, pretty much, made in the U.S. And most of it is FSC as well, just from the economics of trucking lumber across an ocean, and trucks don't float.
Yeah, I was about to say.
they built the bridge from here to China.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That is a very fair point. But yeah, the bamboo is, you're right, super light. So it worked out really well for that.
And one of the things about bamboo is, with the rate it grows, it is pretty sustainable until we start making everything out of bamboo, in which point it will no longer be sustainable. But
well, I mean, it grows like a weed. It's great, and like bamboo as it grows is almost useless in camera building, right? Because it's all of these rings, but then they make multi-ply out of it, and it is insanely strong for its weight. It's pretty cool.
So yeah, it's good stuff. It's worked. I had one of the 8x10s fell off the side of a mountain and did not break. So I was able to go down and pick that up. And then I had one of the 4x5s. I fell down the stairs and landed on it, and which hurt like the dickens. I'm not gonna lie. But two parts of it popped off, and I would just glued them back up and used it later that day. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear about the fall, but by the way, I recommend pillows. Pillows.
Yeah, a little bit easier to fall onto.
Yeah,
Pillow
but
camera.
but these kinds of what am I trying to say? These kinds of tests that we don't plan are very important because
Natural
they do tell you a lot
experiments.
about it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
A minute ago was the control when I was not falling on my camera. Now is the experiment.
It replaces having a budget for destructive testing.
There we go. There. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the design aspect, not necessarily the structure, but your choice of focal length.
Can we also talk about the process a little bit?
Okay, yeah. Yeah. In fact, actually, I suppose that's part of the deal. How did you these are a very specific focal length. We talked about image circle. There are calculators on for pinhole size versus diagonal, image circle that you want and all that type of stuff. So I want to hear about how you got to that aspect of your let's start with the 4x5. You have a 4x5, 5x7, and 8x10.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they all had the same mission, which was to be maximally usable by as many people as possible. And that ultimately guided every single design decision that I made. And I knew early on I wanted them to be build-at-home kits because I wanted people to say, hey, here is not only this thing I use, but that I made it. They could, if they wanted to stain it, polyurethane it, paint it, whatever, they could do that as well. But I wanted it to be something that from the get-go, people could say, this is my camera from day one. And so when people get it, the only things that are going to be pre-installed are going to be the actual pinhole, because that needs a different kind of glue. So I'm going to install that. And then I'm also going to install the bubble levels into them as well, because that'll just simplify things for people.
Yeah.
So at any rate, so everything stemmed from that. And then the first thing I did for these was I looked up the pinhole calculation, and then I manually by hand, I'm not a math guy, so I taught myself enough math to do the pinhole calculations for the 3 standard formats.
Okay.
At that point, the 4x10 was a distant dream, was not a glimmer in my eye, as my grandma used to say. And so I hand calculated them and then verified them with online calculators, and I was off by a couple millimeters here and there, but was pretty close. But I wanted
a couple of millimeters in a pinhole is a lot.
It is.
Are you
in focal length or in
focal length?
Yeah, he's not talking about aperture.
Okay.
No, I was able to figure out the exact pinhole diameter, but the focal length I got a little bit off.
Okay.
But it was important to me to try to do it myself.
Yeah. And empirical testing in this type of thing is very important.
Okay,
Yes.
So I want to know this. I often also start with a little bit of math. The next place I always move is the pencil before CAD. How about you? Where'd you go after math? Were you straight to cardboard boxes, scissors, crazy glue, duct tape, or were you? Yeah,
pencil and graph paper. Actually, not here, but when I'm on lunch, if I'm not out walking with Stein, I take Stein back to the office. And if I'm not out on a walk with him, then I'm at home. I'm at the office on my lunch break, either working on YouTube scripts or working on design iterations for the cameras. So I always start off with pencil and graph paper. In fact, one of the design ideas I've been working on is a gear-based exposure calculator for the Model 2 cameras, so that instead of just having the Sunny 16 calculator on the back, someone can rotate a dial, and that will move a couple of pinions to rack and pinion system. And those pinions will indicate the ISO and the exposure time.
Have you seen a lot of the old exposure slide rules or rotating slide rules?
I have not.
Oh, this is a huge thing, and was like, so for every engineering profession, and many graphic artist professions, they had different slide rules. So, like a standard slide rule would help you calculate logarithms, multiplication, things like that. But they had, astronomical and nautical slide rules, and they also had exposure calculator slide rules, which are doing. Usually, it's not either they're rotating discs or sliding things, not rotating and sliding rack and pinion systems. But after the podcast, let's do a little Google, and there's some real fun ones out there. I have also a PCB slide rule project going, but it's not a photographic one.
Okay. Yeah, that would be that'll be fun. Sorry, train of thought.
So yeah.
So
Go ahead.
pencil and graph paper next, and then once I have something, then I'll on the graph paper I note out what I'm thinking as I'm drawing it, and then I take it into CAD. And because in CAD, then it's really easy to manipulate shapes. I can put all the pieces together and make sure that all of the groove joints are lining up properly, and that does a lot with not having to reorder parts that I've accidentally built incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what's your turnaround on ordering a version? You order a version and then you have a turnaround of a certain amount of time, and if it didn't come out right, you have to reorder that part.
Yeah. For a little while, I was using a makerspace here with a laser. So the turnaround on that was just however often I could get up there. But when I order them online, it's usually about, so as we're recording this, last night I ordered the final pre-production units for the campaign. And those are the ones I'm going to use to make the how to assemble these videos. And then the videos that will explain how to use the cameras. And those will arrive on September 10th. So that's 3 weeks roughly every time I make an order.
That's brutal.
It is. It's a lot of waiting, but the advantage to that is I have a lot of time. When I was in grad school and undergrad getting my degrees in writing, the teachers always said you write something and then you set it aside for 2 weeks and then you come back to it. And it's a rule that I have also for photographs. Sometimes I sit on things for a year and a half, but that gives you the ability to separate from them so you have a fresh perspective when you revisit them. So when the pieces come in, now all of the things I was thinking and intending, those are out of my brain, and I can look at what is actually in front of me. And it's yeah.
In that meantime process, are you working on other things? I mean, obviously you have a life, you got like 5 side gigs, you're doing other things, but are you working on anything sort of camera or that sort of discipline related? And are you keeping a notebook or journal or lab book around that process?
Everything is up here. So I basically, one of my old bosses commented once that I had the best memory of anyone he'd ever met because I could remember numbers like dollar figures down to the penny from 7 years previous. It's like, how much did we bid on this job? Oh, we bid this amount down to this penny, and here's all the logic behind how we came up with that number. And he's like, we don't have the file open. I'm like, I know. I just had it memorized. So all of it's up rattling around up here. But during the production period, when I don't have them, I'll work on other stuff. So the big thing that I do is I'll sit down and I'll start writing camera manual scripts because it's a very repetitive process, and it's always fun to read about the cameras, but because it's repetitive, it helps clear my mind of all of the new creative content that I'm trying to work on. And then the end result is I have a boatload of camera manual scripts written so that when I have a free evening, I just turn the chair around to the studio and can hammer out a bunch of different camera videos. Or right now, what I'm working on is I'm finalizing the all about film videos for ADOC CMS 22, T-Max 100, Cinestill 800, and Delta 100.
Those are some good ones.
Yes, I'm hoping to get those and Kentmere 400 out this year, and possibly also Delta 3200. But But what I'll basically, this is a similar process to building the cameras. It's all of an assembly line. I get everything organized, and the organization is what makes everything flow smoothly. So one of my subscribers on there's a Petapixel article about the campaign, and one of my subscribers left a comment saying that I do the work of 3 people, basically, that I'm just hammering out tons of different content. And the reason I'm able to is because of all of the early stage organization. So when I
By
design
the
a
time
camera,
people know about it, you're 3 years in.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And so organizing a camera build is basically the same thought process as organizing a YouTube video. The all about film ones are very hard. They take 1.5 to 3.5 or 5 years to make, to capture all the photos, because they have 100 to 200 photos in them that I've taken. And to have 100 to 200 photos that are worth sharing and that show what the film can do with 16 to 25 different developer and chemistry combinations just takes time. So I organize all the stuff on my computer, and then I have notes that I put together at the end. And basically, the way that I put those together is if I can look at the video and materials and know what I'm thinking, then I have a pretty good bet that someone watching the video from scratch will as well. And that's the same theory I have with the camera builds. When the parts come in, I want to be the person going into dealing with the camera from scratch. But I still have the notes of what I was thinking of in my head. So if I can get everything to work correctly, then I know I'm on the right track. And if you want, I'm also happy to talk about the process of building a YouTube video if you guys want to touch on that.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think I'm very, very comfortable with the process of cameras. I make a lot of YouTube videos, which I'm very uncomfortable with the process. And I feel like, designing cameras is what I do, right? But YouTube is not what I consider what I do, although I do it. And I go in blind. There's definitely 2mm cracks in my first attempts at all my YouTube videos. And almost everything that I've made has been me recording something, having 30 minutes of me yelling at the screen like Chad, or like, "What's up, guys?" And then just like taking jump cuts of that and putting them together until I have, like, I don't know, 7 jump cuts a second to get myself to say what it is, and then I have to like re-record that. Um, it is also like this iterative process, but YouTube seems extremely hard. There's so many things you could do. That's just bounded by
Yeah.
physics.
Yeah, and creativity. Like, what do you want to create? And that's the hardest part for me is reining myself in when I want to make something. So so I have a few different models that I follow with my YouTube videos. With the camera manuals, I have a word outline, and it follows the same outline. And because all the content is basically the same, I have generally a wrap down for each point in those outlines for what I want to say. So those are really easy. I almost don't edit those.
This
The
is
editing,
professional writer scripting a
exactly.
YouTube video. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I might edit out a couple of coughs or something like that, but generally speaking, I don't. It's about 1 in 10 videos where I
You're
have
not
to
trying to
retake a
figure
section.
out the meaning in the editing. You knew
Correct.
before you recorded. Like I
Correct.
should, but do not.
Then the other way that I do it is with the camera reviews, which are voiceovers, my hike logs, which are voiceovers, and the all about film videos. I'll write out the script ahead of time. All about film, the script is an outline, but the other ones are actually narrative paragraph scripts. And I have a mic over here that I'll just connect to a preamp and then a recorder, and I just talk right into it. And I'll pull that up in Audacity and then edit out the coughs. But because the script is pre-written, because I've read it out loud 2 or 3 times before I record, I'm usually not making a whole lot of cuts in the audio file as well. So then it just becomes a matter of syncing up the video and the audio. The best thing that any YouTube creator can do is do all of the pre-organization to set themselves up in post to have the minimum amount of work possible. It's sort of like the old advice of do all of your image in camera. If you don't have to go to the darkroom and do a whole lot of extra work on the print or in post and digital, if you do it correctly in camera, you're going to save yourself a ton of time later. And that's the philosophy I use behind the videos. Also why a lot of them end up looking very similar. So I look at some of the other photography YouTubers like Steve O'Nions. I was watching his most recent video last night, and just thinking about like how much different they are from mine. Whereas I'm aware that mine, it's me talking almost the whole time. And his has these moments where he'll just take footage in a field, and it's just the sound of the field or some quiet music in the background. And I was sitting there last night watching that and thinking, I really appreciate that style and probably need to teach myself to shut up in my videos.
I sometimes think it's like fun to try and shoot like just still photos, shoot like somebody you admire for a day, even very different. I think it's worth a worth a trying the Steve Onions video style once or twice and see what's.
Yeah.
But you should not take YouTube advice from me.
That's all right. And I'm happy to get advice from anyone, whether they mean it well or not.
I love these trolls.
The trolls make me so much better.
Ah, man.
No, but at any rate, so then a big part of that is then how the files are structured on my computer. So I set up a folder system, and all of my All About Film videos have the exact same folder structure. Well, basically, the black and whites have a set folder structure, and the colors have a modestly different one. Because the folder
structure. You also have like many spreadsheets referring to these and cross-referencing, I suppose. Just all in here.
Here, and then I have one notepad file where I keep track of which of the film videos I'm going to do next. So I have 2022 and 2023 sketched out for the All About Film series already. And so what I do is I'll use, instead of a spreadsheet, then I use the folder structure to keep track of what's going on and where I am. So when I open up an All About Film video folder, the root folder is Ilford Delta 100. And then there's a folder that says photos, parentheses, and right now it says 158 or something like that. And that number in parentheses is the total number of photos. Go into that folder, and now there are all of these subfolders for all of the different developers and concentrations. So D76 plus 1 and plus 3 are separate folders, parentheses, the number of photos in that folder.
Hey, David, back in the day, were you a reader of Pop Photo?
No, never heard of it.
Popular Photography?
Oh, okay, yeah, yes, I did used to read that.
So back, I think it was every like September or November was like the film issue, and they did this, right? But they probably had 100 interns, shooting and developing the same picture in every different chemistry and time combo, and they would produce like these giant, like the whole issue was just a chart.
Yeah. Yeah, that I wish I had that manpower to help me out. I'd punch out one of these videos a week.
And insane that you are trying to sort of get that that breadth on that many.
Yeah, it's fun, and that also is how it is that when I release one of these videos, I'll do a community post on my community tab saying, here's how many developers I used, and here's how many cameras I used in all of these different formats, so I can keep track of the formats and things like that. And yeah, one of my subscribers left a comment on one of the early All About Films saying, hey, these are great, but I don't know which photo came from which format. And so then now, in addition to just showing the photos, I now also have to overlay, I don't have to, but I choose to overlay all of the formats that I use for each photo so that people can see how it performs in different formats as well. It is so much work to make one of those videos, but they help people, and that's the important part.
Cool.
I want to head back to the development and the focal length that you came up with for each one of your cameras. I'm not asking you to tell us what exactly that was
Like what is the optimization problem, right? Which is
Yeah.
probably going to be like image
Yeah.
illumination versus angle of view.
Yeah.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so actually every camera has the specs on the side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hang on one second. Here's what I want to ask is, what were you looking for? Were you looking for the ultimately sharp image, or were you looking for a normal field of view, or were you looking for
Even
zero
illumination.
light fall off? What was the what was it that you were working towards?
So every one of these is designed to balance sharpness with even illumination.
Okay.
And that was a big thing. I wanted these when I told my photo lab, they developed a bunch of the Portra 160 shots I took on 4x5. And I was talking on over email to Laz, the lab manager, and I said, yeah, I took these on a pinhole camera I built. And he didn't believe me at first because the illumination is so even from corner to corner. And they're relatively sharp. And Andrew of Andrew and Danae did a video with that 4x5 as well. And his examples show a similar thing, which is that the illumination is even. And then the sharpness, coincidentally, with all four of the models, the optimum sharpness, the focal length for the optimum sharpness also provided very even illumination. So I didn't have to do too much juggling between those two.
Okay. So how many iterations were you working through to get to that point versus iterations to make sure that the mechanics of it okay, so let me ask it this way. How long before you started your production run, and not production run, but the run up to production, let's say?
So the first generation of each of the cameras had the same focal length as the final. And that flowed out from doing the math up front. So I went into the design knowing exactly how long the focal length needed to be to achieve the goals that I wanted. And then the first generation just proved that I had done the math correctly.
Okay.
And the photos from the first generation camera that I took are just as sharp and evenly illuminated as the final cameras. So realistically, the generations just became iterations of the way that the cameras fit together and how easily they were built. The most significant change in the later generations was the design of the film back and the design of the shutter, just to make both of those easier and more reliable.
Okay. Okay. So why don't you go? We're looking at it's 4 different cameras on your Kickstarter, right?
Correct.
So 4x5, 5x7, 4x10, and 8x10. Correct?
Correct. Yes. And the 4x10 can also shoot 2 4x5 film backs, not at the same time, but either or.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So,
why don't you go through features? Why don't you talk about like the design of the shutter, which is one that is similar to, but I think it's significantly different from most other commercially available pinhole shutter systems.
Yeah. So my up until version 9, this is a version 9 4x5. I used this bamboo shutter, and it was perfect for the longest time. But for something in the texture of the bamboo changed, and this shutter is super sticky, and I've never been able to get it to a point where it moves smoothly like all of the previous generations.
And let me describe for people who are listening, that is a shutter that's simply a slide. It has an opening and it has a closed side, and you just slide it from one to the other in this case, in portrait mode, it runs along the longer end of the camera. So in portrait mode, it would be up and down. In landscape mode, it would be side to side.
Could. On the larger formats than 4x5, they're big enough that this could be oriented either direction. And that was a big thing. I wanted this to be orientable in either direction so people could place it however they were comfortable, left or right-handed.
Okay. So as you build it, you can make that decision.
The old design, correct. The new designs only go together one way.
Okay.
So, but this was, and this worked out really well for the longest time, but just I couldn't I gave up on this because of the issues with the friction here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
one of the things about shooting pinhole is that you want two things out of the shutter. And that is, you want a smooth movement while opening it so you do not get camera shake. And the other thing is, it's got to stay shut when it's shut. So so I
Although
understand
it's
that
less
you've got
important on
friction.
a large format one, right? Because you're not going to walk around with this with the dark slide out with the film holder and just like hoping that the shutter,
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so on a camera like David's or mine, like you kind of just want like a very easy thing that won't
Yeah,
look like for
yeah, you do have the added advantage on a large format of the dark slide. So you're not going to accidentally, if it opens in the bag, it's not going to be a problem.
yeah,
So
you got to have
yeah.
some locking on all of the roll film pinholes that you build.
right, exactly.
Yes. And so the final cameras have this shutter, which replaces the bamboo slide with a rotating aluminum plate. And
Okay.
there's one other thing I would say is important in a shutter, which if you're taking a long exposure, is that once it moves up into place smoothly, it can stay there without me having to hold the shutter in place. And then when I come back, I can just flip it back and the exposure's done.
And I assume you're letting the user like tension those three around the thing to get an optimal amount of friction on.
Correct. If I just turn this about 1/10 of a turn, now it's a whole lot looser.
Yeah.
So if I take it out too far, this one's not going to cooperate. It's not going to get too loose to stay up. But another advantage of the felt lining in back is that when the nut gets tightened down on the front here, it compresses the felt. And so the felt holds the nut in place, meaning that the only thing that's needed to adjust the tension is access to this front screw. And so the user doesn't have to take the back off in order to adjust the tension.
Interesting.
I made a very different decision.
Yeah.
Which is that I use a Nylock nut. You know what a Nylock is?
It's got the nylon
yeah, exactly.
ring inside of it.
So
yeah.
it won't walk, right? Which means that you set the tension, it's always going to hold that tension. That being said, in 10 years, these surfaces are going to wear down, it's going to get loose, and then you will need a pliers or something, a wrench, something to hold the Nylock nut in place while you change this. So my decision was sort of like a slightly longer lasting calibration there, but like it's also going to require a tool if it ever.
Yeah.
And I gave that a post thought. I looked at nylon nuts. Ultimately, I went with this approach because I figured the aluminum's going to wear against the bamboo more quickly than like materials wear against each other. And so there's probably going to be a more frequent need over the first year to just make a slight tenth of a turn adjustment every few months.
Okay. Interesting.
And then if you had the nylon nut, of course, because you couldn't adjust that so easily, then it would just wear out the bamboo a little bit more quickly.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, I just want to, you can see pictures of all of these if you're listening. In the show notes, there will be a link to the Kickstarter. At this point, the Kickstarter has about 4 or 5 days left. So if you are at all interested, now's the time to jump. So yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more. Tell us about the design. Tell us about more of the design decisions.
So everything is designed to be maximally accessible. So this is the 4x10, right? And the text here, try and get it on camera. There you go. Is very dark. It's very easy to read. The font on this model is something like 36 point. So it's a very large print. Then on the backs of each camera, there's an exposure guide for Sunny 16, so that if someone's out in full sun, they know their ISO and the shutter speed that they're using.
All right, hold it a little to your, that way.
Yeah. So,
a little bit.
Yep.
Now move your head to the left.
There we go.
One leg. Okay, great.
And so you can see the exposure calculator goes from 1 ISO, which is like liquid light, or like a bromide photo paper, like a FOMA 332, which is an awesome paper that was discontinued, to 2 ISO, which is J-lane standard plates. and then up to as fast as 800 ISO. I used to go up to 3200 ISO on these, but I thought, I mean, like no one's actually doing a 1/20th of a second exposure.
Yeah, and if you're shooting 3200, what are you doing with a pinhole?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
So they're really designed for slightly longer exposures, but then right here, somebody doesn't need to carry a light meter with them or a light meter app if they're out in full sun. Then this is for the side, you can see the sighting lines.
I like that you did the sighting lines like that.
Yes.
That is my preference. Almost everybody else that I know is pinhole or prefers them in reverse. And so the first gen didn't have sighting lines, but like my sighting lines go both ways because I couldn't convince people.
I don't,
that is definitely my preference, the way you've got it.
Yeah, I just want somebody to be able to put their eye up behind it and just move their head. And so the final cameras, I redid some geometry on the cameras last night to make them a little bit cheaper to cut. So I'm going to put bubble levels in all of the cameras now. And when they're level, the bubble will take the place of this point. So the bubble levels are going to go right here, and then it's going to be bubble out to point. And that also reduced the cost a little bit by cutting out some of the engraving, which is a very spendy design element.
We should talk about cheaper ways to engrave. I do a lot of wholesale cutting, and it looks like you've got some raster engraving, but like, so I know, looking at your thing, besides, I actually really love the look of these boxes. I think the exposure calculator is like a heinous crime on the back of it. But beyond that, from a manufacturing standpoint, I think it is like probably as expensive to raster that data onto your camera as it is to cut a lot of the parts.
It's all vector.
Oh, okay.
So everything in here is uploaded as an EPS to the manufacturer.
No. Okay, but the okay.
So, I see what you're saying. Because it is
the file
actually
is vector,
correct.
but that is a rastered engraving. Whereas so my cameras would be as expensive as yours if I rastered these lines, but I in fact cut those lines less deeply, and so you can get some thinner lines, and you can get them pretty dark too. But I mean, the cost of the markings on that camera, some very beautiful, it's got to be crazy.
It is. This camera, if I were to produce it with no markings, would be $85 less.
Yep.
So, So then the side here, this is the other sighting line, and then all of the cameras on the bottom where the tripod socket goes also have sighting lines so that people can put them up above their heads.
Version 1, no sight lines. Version 2, sight lines on 3 sides.
Yes.
The one that I released, just put them everywhere.
Everywhere. If I didn't have all the data on this side, I would put the sighting lines in there. One thing I had thought about and just could never do in a way that I liked the look of was actually building the sighting lines into the finger joints, so that instead of following sighting lines, there would be set finger joints somewhere on like a marking here, and then certain finger joints up here that would represent where people look.
Yeah, so I think that's clever. I don't know if you can see. Let's see if I can make myself big here. Hold on. Why don't I have the right? Okay, so I just used these protrusions from the finger joints in the back plane, and those are what hold the elastics on. Back. But I think likewise, Joe and I have talked about. I mean, this is the tripod screw, but you could just as easily pick a thing up here, or you could put a small finger joint in the spot, which I had not thought about. But we've talked about even like one here, and just sight. I eventually just went for like as clean and indestructible as possible. I think there's some interesting things one figure out, interdigitating those finger joints.
Yeah, a lot of usability problems can be solved with clever design. And then I think that's really the majority of it. And then I have the 4x10 here. I'll show you the inside of it real quickly.
Oh, this is a cool latching system.
So this latching system is unique to this model of the camera because it can shoot either a single 4x10 image, so that's the 4x10 opening, or I don't have any 4x5 film backs at hand.
Oh, here you go.
But thank you.
Yeah.
But if you put two 4x5 film backs in this shape and then mount them in the camera,
That's
you
why I
get
use the back
diptychs, and then
Yeah.
then these spacers hold the 4x5 so that there's no light leaks and they're centered within the
Yeah.
4x10 opening.
Okay, so we were talking before. I have a 4x10 pinhole camera as well for two 4x5, and the biggest problem is this separation bar in the center takes too much of that image out. He has solved it by making the back light tight for that joint.
Okay, I
Yes.
gotta ask.
Ethan's got it. He knows exactly what's going to happen.
So the
What?
problem is, even though David has come up with like a really good way to light seal that, you still have. Put myself up here. Why don't I have the right hotkey for me? Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
You still have
you're not
the
hot enough.
bottom of
Correct.
these pieces of film
Yeah.
can't come within this. What is it? 12 or 13 millimeters of the bottom here.
You lose about an inch in the middle.
Yeah. No, but the difference is with mine, you still have that space, plus you have a bar. And so that took a lot out of it. And I've really only shot that camera once.
And so the idea isn't to take the two 4x5s and have the negatives marry up perfectly to create a perfect seamless image.
Not a panorama, it's a diptych.
Correct. It's intentionally designed to be a diptych camera where that space between the two 4x5 negatives becomes an artistic part of the image composition.
Yeah. One of the things that you're talking about how you would shoot that is one of the things that I did a lot was, while making sure that there was something that was continuous between both sides, I would have something close in one side, something far in the other, and that continuous element would bring it across. At least that's my brain when I was thinking about shooting it. And I think that there's something really fun and interesting about that approach. And shooting that does save you the $150 film holder or $180 film holder. So,
Graham, I'm very surprised that you did not bring this up, which is that we're both real into stereo pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a single lens, right? That does a left and a right side.
Why don't you have a three pinhole?
Yeah,
because people have drills, Graham.
Well, because Dominic did that with his Minuta stereo earlier this year. I have my Minuta stereo that Dominic sent me to test when the campaign was going on in the other room, but he does that already, and I didn't feel that there was an advantage to me doing that as well. Plus, it increased the complexity of the design and the assembly.
People got drill bits.
Yeah.
Right. If somebody wants to modify it, they can.
Yeah, I'm not saying they should all go out and drill your beautiful bamboo cameras. However, I mean, I think some people are it's inevitable, right? I sell cameras too. People are going to make weird, fantastical, and sometimes terrible things out of your creations.
That's okay. I want people to have it be their camera, not mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, that gets me to one question. The bamboo that you're sending out is unfinished bamboo, right?
Correct.
So you can finish this how you want?
Correct. I think for me, the best finishing is just a few layers of a matte polyurethane. I think that looks striking. Okay. But I actually haven't finished any of them in a number of generations because I've also found that the weather of being out hiking with these and then it starts raining or they fall in the dirt or whatever gives the cameras a really nice character all their own.
Okay.
So, but if somebody wanted to paint them or put stickers on them or whatever, they should feel welcome to do that.
So
something like a Get Closer. Yeah, there we go.
I have.
I'm sorry.
I have a really similar preference to you in look. My preference is like just a little bit of linseed oil or Danish oil, which is like it's not like matte poly is going to be a more durable, waterproof, whatever. But I also have like an unfinished camera over there that's just like taken battle scars. It's a big box, 8x10. It's taken battle
Yeah.
scars from being a test bed for years, and it has like all sorts of screws in it. I was thinking that it might be nice to have like all of the people who I photograph that just sign the busted up wood, uh, like Willie Nelson's guitar. Uh,
That would be very cool.
And then shellac it like they do with the old beat up pickups, right? They grind off the paint and then do a clear coat.
I also got to say, I really love the aesthetic on your cameras.
Yeah.
So I'm very Bauhaus about things, and like I built a long time ago. I am no stranger to building flat pack.
That's very nice looking.
Well, so says you. Reddit says I am an ass for not sanding and finishing all of these box joints. So this was like a drafting board briefcase that I made a while ago that has like a slot in here. And Reddit was just after me that I left all of these joints, unfinished and exposed, and like they hated the look of it. And like, I don't leave on any char, but I will let it stay, darker brown. And I think it's very Bauhaus to show how the thing goes together, right? And beautiful in its own right, and particularly like with the thick bamboo, and you have a lot of small joints. I dig that. I wonder how much of that was like an aesthetic choice versus like it's structurally very strong as well, and how much you have gotten the internet telling you that it looks unfinished because you show some joints.
So there's three reasons that the joints exist as they do. The most important is that I'm not going to sand off all of the char because it aesthetically looks fantastic.
I think so too, and it'd be $5,000 to sand off everything. Let somebody do that.
Yeah, the other reason is that the way that the joints are designed, the cameras can only go together correctly one way, and that is with having all of the text outside. The biggest thing is that the pinholes on all four of the models are not centered in the camera. They're centered on the film plane. So where those two diagonals on each film holder meet, that's where the pinhole's placed. So it's slightly off center vertically on each camera. If somebody were to put the front plate on upside down, then they would end up with the image being cut off on part of the film plane.
It's impossible
every time
to do so unless they build everything upside down, in which case then they just get a right side up picture.
Exactly. Yes. As long as all the text faces out. And it will be a
negative.
Yes. As long as all of the text faces outside, the camera cannot go together incorrectly. There is only one part of the camera right now that can go in either way, and that's the part that the film holders rest up against. And one side of those uses a thin ultra suede felt for light proofing, and then the other side uses a 3 millimeter thick wool felt for the light gasket.
Give me one of these kits. I'll figure out how to put it together backwards.
and as long as people don't flip that piece around, they're going to be just fine.
Says you now. You're going to get Kickstarter emails for a year. I don't know. Mine came out like a pyramid.
How come I don't have any text on the one you sent me?
But that's always an opportunity to have an interesting conversation with somebody about camera building.
Okay, so I'm gonna put both of you on the spot for design. Now, I don't know if you guys listen regularly to the Lensless, but the Lensless podcast with Corey and
Cocaine and Waffles
and the Salt Lord, Andrew. But one of the things that they talk about quite often, and one of the things that they talk a lot about with the guests, is some of the results you can get with this. And for those of you who don't know, I'm holding up an Ondu, which is a beautiful, beautiful device. It's an Ondu 6x6. It's the first generation Ondu 6x6. But one of the things that they love is the fact that the film plane, or excuse me, let me say this differently, the focal length, and of course, there really is no focal length on pinhole, but
Sure, there is.
the film or the pinhole to lens distance gives them a distorted, different, unique view. It is consciously a pinhole camera. It is consciously something that is not a lensed 4x5 or a lensed camera at all. And that they absolutely love that aspect of it. So, number one, are you and I'm not saying that I'm speaking for the whole community, because I'm not speaking for the whole community. I have a
You're
four by
speaking for
five with
Simon and Johnny
well,
Perry.
well, here's a reasonable focal length 4x5 box that I made out of hickory plank. That is the hickory plank that's in my office here. So I like that, but then also here I'm gonna hold up the Gorgon, which I will. We're gonna do a show about the Gorgon when I finish it. But this is the pinhole version of the Gorgon, which has a pinhole to film length of about 40 millimeters, but it's a panorama that's 72 millimeters wide, so it is distorted. And yes, I do get fall off, and yes, I do get that. Are you planning? I'm going to ask David this first. Are you planning on something that addresses that kind of concern with the people who want the conscious pinhole versus the people who want the best fidelity out of a pinhole? Do and you can, the Santa Barbara pinholes, the Leonardo pinhole are mostly normal focal lengths. Well, we'll go with the normal.
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. I have 3 of the Ondos, and I love the 6x6. It's my favorite of the 3 of them. Yeah, it is a wonderful camera. I think it's the best of the Ondu cameras by far. And I do appreciate the consciously pinhole aesthetic. The objective with this was a different aesthetic. So with this generation, that's a no. With future cameras, I'm not in any way, shape, or form opposed to it, because I do like that look. I also like the idea of using a pinhole camera to experiment with perspective distortion via magnification, right? Specifically, the way that the magnification at the edge of the image cone is different from the magnification at the center of the image cone, and how can that be used to create an image? So some of that requires things like the pinhole being able to move, and that's something I think is a fascinating idea that I have not successfully put into practice yet on one of my cameras. It's very easy to do with a 4x5 field camera, of course. But I do really appreciate that spectrum of the image aesthetic. It's just not something I put into place with this lineup.
Okay. Ethan, do you have an answer, or is the answer the same thing of the my favorite Marilyn Manson lyric which is, I wasn't born with enough middle fingers to all you pinholers.
You've got my yeah.
I'm the devil's side.
No, so I optimized for different, although I also know exactly where David's coming from. So I think again, I'm not against sort of like experimental photography or weird pre-exposed or expired films, but generally where I at least like to start designing, unless it's a wacky Joe Van Cleve project, is like making something that's high fidelity and that is technically capable, and then let people distort from there rather than giving them something distorted and making it impossible. Something technically clean. So cleanliness, sharpness is important to me. Even illumination is not important to me so much as focal length. So I offer both of these 4x5s and 8x10s in 2 lengths, and one is just sort of a standard wide that will have a very even illumination. The 90 millimeter 4x5. It's going to look very sharp and clean. But also, embracing that pinhole. But what you can get out of a pinhole is like you can get crazy wide stuff where, you know, a lens that would do the same would be very expensive, large, and, you know, totally different. So I made a 45 millimeter pinhole kit, and also I think I did a 135 and a 210 on the 10, so a pretty wide one. And you know, they will definitely have vignetting in the corners, but they also see bananas wide. Like a 45 on a 4x5 or a 135 on an 8x10 is like, you know, I mean, the angle of view is
Yeah.
that. And so like this is never going to have totally even illumination. I mean, it covers pretty much the whole thing, but yeah, I wanted to give people like a wacky wide lens if they wanted it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is a ton of fun. I mean, honestly, if I have often dreamed about getting, you know, super wide lenses on sheet film, and they just are not cheap at all. There's no option. So pinholes, really, that's the entryway for people who want to shoot sheet film into going super wide.
Unless you're Matthew Joseph, who wants
Well,
a bespoke...
Matthew Joseph has, you know, a $200 camera dactyl OG that he put a $1,200
Yes.
you know, Angulon lens, Super Angulon XL, and he takes some beautiful, very wide pictures. It's a 47, right? And they're, you know, sharp and rectilinear. But yeah, okay, you know, I thought, you know, the common use of pinhole is like, one, you have like about a standard or a slightly wide standard lens, and then what, you know, like you could make telephoto pinholes for looking at space or mountains or whatever, but those are big and cumbersome, not fun to carry around, and it's not how I like to shoot. And having an ultra wide like that, you know, I don't really own any lenses.
And it's really pretty simple. Like, for instance, all of mine shoot, all of my standard format ones shoot with an area, a field of view that is equivalent to 18 to 22 millimeters in 35 millimeter terms. So they're amply wide. Yeah. So it is also really possible to achieve an amply wide image with even illumination. It's just when you get to the extremes that the pinholes don't deliver quite like an amply wide multi-element lens would.
I mean, I would say a 90 is probably, I don't know, the equivalent of a 24 to 28 on 4x5, depending upon whether you're doing horizontal or vertical.
It is on the diagonal. So my 4x5 is a 90, and I think it's equivalent on the diagonal to a 22. But you know, shoot it like a 24 to a 28, and that gives you enough room to crop a little bit. So I think that shooting practice that's a good guide.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the actual Kickstarter itself. It runs through, when is the recording? Oh, go ahead.
Give us the important stats that you want people to know.
Like what, and also what to search. Well, here, I'll tell them. Here's what you're going to search. You're going to search either David's name, so David Hancock on Kickstarter, or the other one is here. This one is called Large Format Pinhole Cameras to Build at Home. So large format pinhole cameras to build at home. That'll get you there. But then you're looking at, like, I have no idea. but tell us about what what your goal is. If this is successful, where are you going after that? What's the because usually I mean, you could just put these up on an Etsy shop or an eBay shop and start selling them, but you're going through Kickstarter. And then one other question: what's 5119?
Okay, so we'll answer the easiest one first. 5119 cameras. In a former life, I was a real estate broker, and I was going to be working with a company that was going to buy up contaminated property, remediate it, and then resell it to either commercial or residential standards for reuse.
For daycares.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're gonna take those PCB fields and turn them into daycares.
Yeah.
So I was in Illinois, and one of the rules about being a self-sponsoring real estate broker in Illinois is that you have to have a sign on your place of business with the business name. I was self-sponsoring at home. The development did not allow any business signage on houses. So I was in a bind. And so I went out to the front of my house to start thinking, and I realized I could see the number and read it from the street.
Where you're going.
So I set up my business name as my house number.
Oh man, that is a beautiful workaround.
And when I started selling, and I always thought that was particularly clever. So when I started selling cameras on Amazon, I kept the name. My Etsy shop has the same name, and so I just decided that's going to be the brand of my yes. Sure. And
and you're working in marketing, so I teach logo design. So one of the things that we talk about is you need a discoverable meaning. There's your discoverable meaning.
Discoverable name, discoverable meaning. No, I'm the only camera shop I know of that starts off with a number. You know, there's another marketing company in San Francisco called 283 Design or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, back in the old days of phone books, that put you right up near the top of the list as well. But it's a distinction that that no one else that I'm aware of is really using. So I just adopted it, and it's worked. I've had a lot of people think it's the elevation I live at because we're in Denver, but and other theories like that.
Wait,
but
I guess that would be in feet. I was going to say,
yeah.
Aren't we off a little bit? And yeah.
Anyway. So mine are number one cameras at 1 mile out.
Yeah.
Are they any good? No, but number one.
But they're made at a mile up. No.
Yeah.
But so that's where that came from. Then the why go to Kickstarter is to so the Kickstarter campaign is the goal of it is going to be to enable me to develop the prototypes for the 120s. I do have a non-functional design prototype for the 6x6, and they have an entirely different image aesthetic or physical aesthetic rather. They are going to look like vintage radios. And they're also going to be assemble at home kits. I don't have it accessible to me. They are, I think the outside is stunning. So, but they're also, the whole lineup of those is going to be very time consuming to make. So if this campaign is successful, then I'll be able to afford to buy my own laser cutter next year that will be strong enough to cut through the material for the 120s, which is significantly smaller than the material that I'll be using on the bamboo cameras.
And that'll be out on the deck of, with the view of the front range.
Yes. Where the smoke can be not inside my apartment.
There we go. All right. Okay, cool. And I love the idea of the 120s. Are you going down to 35? Do you have plans on 35?
No.
Okay.
The sole reason
That's
for that
good because mine is 35, so I would have to beat you.
No, I have zero interest in going smaller than 120 solely because when you get into things like frame counting, unless you just want to do the stick a piece of plastic in and have it tick off, then exactly. I don't want to work out the gearing for that. And I know I could just open up a Lomography's, one of their cameras, and just steal their ideas, but I also don't want to be that guy.
Sure.
So,
standing on the backs of Austrian giants, I mean, we all do it one way or another, So
yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, none. I don't. Honestly, none of my ideas in any of these cameras are newer than the patents on them that expired 120 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's no original ideas in the space realistically.
Yeah.
But only realistic design refinements, or only original design refinements. So the 120s I want to have again be built at home, and also the image quality on a 120 is still really good. By the time you get to a 35, it starts to get really soft. I have here. I'll show you this guy. I got this old Paxset Braun Paxset camera.
Sure.
The lens was broken off of it, so I just built a pinhole slide shutter for it. And it takes 24 by 24 images because I masked off the camera obscura on it.
I know a thing or two about 24 by 24.
Yeah,
I love 24
pictures.
24.
They are soft.
Oh yes. Oh, yes.
Well, I mean, they really is a 24 by 24 pinhole camera image softer than a disc camera with a lens?
Good question.
Depends on the disc camera.
Yeah, depends
Fun
on the
fact
film.
about disc cameras.
Yeah.
The camera lens with the highest line per millimeter rating ever recorded was on a disc camera.
Really?
Yes. Unfortunately, disc film was commercial grade film and couldn't keep up with that lens's 2500 line per millimeter rating.
Wow.
Yeah, I forget which model camera it was. It was one of the Kodaks.
Yeah.
So, but at any rate, yeah. So the other factor is like with the 4x5, when you display it on social media, you're going to reduce that negative, so it functionally becomes sharper. But when you're
Sure.
talking about 35 or 120, it's going to get enlarged and it amplifies the softness. So
Yeah.
you've got to really, really embrace that pinhole aesthetic on 35 millimeter, and that combined with the mechanical complexity, it's not an alleyway I want to venture down.
Okay, I can understand that. My aesthetic is that I absolutely love that. That I love to see grain the size of my eye. You know, if I'm taking a self portrait. So I mean, and to each his own, and I don't have any problem with that. And that's one of the things about Pinhole that I absolutely love is that there is a freedom and there is an allowance from the viewer on what they are seeing. If they understand the Pinhole aesthetic, that they are going to say, hey, that's not sharp, but that is okay.
Yep.
So there's that. I also love handheld Pinhole. So I'm not going for tack sharp. I'm going for washes. So anyway. Okay, so you're thinking about going in. Can I ask one question about your direction being okay, so you're going for this laser cutter idea that is pretty much flat square rectangle 90 degrees. I mean, you could do some different things, but I'm going to hold up the Undo again, and they went CNC CAD, router systems. Is there a reason why you like that flat pack approach as opposed to the router approach?
Yeah, one of the things is that with a CNC router, it's a different design. You have to account for the wider drill bit design and things like that. It's also like I'm not an industrial designer or an engineer by trade. All of this I'm teaching myself as I go. And a lot of that CNC stuff is above and beyond my design and engineering capabilities.
Also just wildly expensive.
Yes.
Well, okay, it's wildly expensive, but the cheapest home laser is much more expensive than the cheapest home router that will do wood. So
yeah, but you don't really. I think we'll do wood, and we'll do wood at the sort of precision and it's not just like the cost of the tool; it's the cost of running the tool and how many parts you get. Like CNC, people think you just say camera and push a button and it makes you a camera out of a block of wood, but like it is a much more involved product to make a Undo over one of these.
And they had a team of, I want to say it was 8 people working for months to build their cameras.
They do them in batch.
And they are beautiful. I do think the Undus are probably the most beautiful pinhole cameras I've ever seen made.
I agree.
Yeah, they have an amazing eye for design.
Hands down, they rule.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah. So it's basically, it's just a matter of what I have access to and what I can make that's easy for people to build at home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that build at home component, making it your own, is definitely something that I see as attractive. So,
I've been,
Thank you.
so
yeah.
okay. So, is there anything else you want to tell us about? Is there anything else about the Kickstarter? Anything else you want to tell us about? We've talked about your YouTube channel quite a bit. We've talked about the pinholes. We've talked about the aesthetics. We've talked about different approaches. So, is there anything else that's in your brain? You got to get out. I got to get out before.
Not today. I think that is pretty much it. Yeah, that was everything. I mean, honestly, we've covered everything and more that I talk about in the campaign and everything. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So I want to say a couple of shout outs. One of them is to Ben Reynolds and Duve Khrushchev and Nicole Small, who all tuned in to the YouTube live. Ben wanted a link to the Kickstarter. It'll be in the show notes, but I'll throw him a link to the Kickstarter here in a second as well. There we go.
Did they have any questions for me that I can answer?
There are no questions other than the post the link. Duve says, good to have you on the podcast. I've learned so much from your film reviews. Best on the internet.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's, and Ben just waved.
Okay. So I think now's a good time. David, where can people find you? And if you have any shout outs, let's do those. And we'll wrap up.
So firstly, I people can find me at my YouTube channel, David Hancock, or on my my Amazon or Etsy store, 5119 Cameras. And I also use Instagram intermittently under my name and my dog's name, Steinbeck.Hancock. If you just want to see photos of my dog, it's Steinbeck.Hancock.
I'm gonna look that up right now.
Yes.
Very good. Graham, where can people find you on the internet?
Hang on a second. Steinbeck.Hancock. There we go. Beautiful chocolate lab.
Yeah, he's a lab pointer mix. He's adorable. And do you have a minute for a few shout outs?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
I do want to firstly thank the backers who have backed so far on the campaign, because it means tons to me whether we succeed or not. You believe in this project. Mm-hmm. Also, the people who have really helped me with this campaign, Eric and Jim, you guys, and my brother Chad, who were all very helpful with feedback on the camera usability and the design. Andrew, of course, from Andrew and Danae, and Dan from the Shawnee Union channel, and the Pinhole Facebook group. All of those people were very helpful, and my wife, who tolerated so much in the way of these cameras over the last 3 years. She has been an absolute saint when it comes to that. So,
yeah. Okay. Cool. And also, don't we at this point say, "Hey, you gotta press like and subscribe"? Okay, no.
Oh yeah, like and subscribe.
Just tell them where people can find you, Graham. Let's wrap this thing up.
No, well, I've got one more shout out. Shout out to Jonas Colmatorn. He sent me a message yesterday. Hey, how's it going? You can get a hold of me, Graham at homemadecamera.com. I am Graham Homemade Camera on Instagram. Nick is not here. Nick is out camping, enjoying the great wilderness. He is Nick at homemadecamera.com, and he is he's Nick Lyle on Instagram, or Avi Nick. He's
Avi Nick.
Nick Lyle, whichever one. And how do we get a hold of Mr. Cameradactyl?
You can find me at cameradactyl.com and my flat pack camera kits, and Instagram is at cameradactyl. You guys ready?
Okay. And we want to say thank you very much to Robbie Cribbs of Soundtrap Studios. He composed our music, lets us use it, and thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.